Good evening, everybody, and a warm welcome to our session, our Methodist Women in Britain series on Let's Talk About It, and all of those topics that we don't normally talk about in church, but we're going to talk about them here. So since launching this series, our mission as Methodist Women in Britain has been very clear, which is to confront difficult global realities and not with fear, with courage and compassion, guided by our faith. We believe that living out our calling to empower women and to seek justice and make Christ known requires us to face issues that are often pushed into the shadows. And we've already tackled very challenging topics, which include topics like menopause, and most recently, we've spoken about intimacy, which you can find on our website if you missed those. But tonight we're talking about something a little more serious, and for me, something that's heart-wrenching for me. And we're breaking the silence on one of the most urgent global issues affecting women and girls, and that's female genital mutilation, also known as FGM. Now, the reality of this is very stark. The practice affects millions and impacts communities right here in the UK. But we're not here just to raise awareness. We're here to seek practical knowledge and tangible solutions and to protect our sisters. And that's why we are honored, immensely honored, to partner with Forward UK, a leading African women-led organization dedicated to ending all forms of violence against women and girls. Their work is rooted in cultural expertise and unwavering dedication to survivorship. And they embody the strength and resilience of sisters across the world, women who emerge from trauma to find freedom and new life. So tonight we are delighted to welcome Yvette Robin Coker, who was Forward UK's Training and Development Coordinator, who will tell us a little bit more about what they do at Forward, introduce us to Forward, and then as people who are interfacing with survivors and advocators, and also those who work tirelessly against this. She will give us a bit of information. Yvette, you are most welcome. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you very much, Olive and Leonora. Thank you for the invitation. I must say it is a privilege to be here and spend time with you talking about what we do in Forward. And I have been in Forward. This is an area that I grew up with. I knew about this problem in Africa, but because I hailed from Africa, Sierra Leone, I can say the Gambia as well. I grew up in two countries, but it's an area that I've never had an interest in. But my background is education. And when I got here, Forward needed somebody who would, work on the training aspect, train people. They realized the need for somebody to be there to train people. And I quickly jumped on the bandwagon. So can you imagine something you never showed any interest in when you were there? All of a sudden, in this new community, you now had to learn about it and show skills. But the good thing is you have some lived experiences, because I grew up with young girls, went to school with them who had gone through this experience. I knew about it, but I did not really fully understand what it entails until I had to do this job. Then I had to read up, I had to talk to people and understand what it is. As you've rightly said, Olive, Forward is an African women-led organization working to end violence against women and girls. We started off with FGM. I remember when I joined Forward about 13, 14 years now, it was FGM that was the focus. But then we need to respond to what is happening in the community. And so we've expanded. Now we are looking at VOG, for short, violence against women and girls, because all of these things are connected. You cannot look at one aspect and forget about the other aspect. You need to look at them together. as a whole aspect. And also, let me point out that though we say it's African-led organization, it doesn't mean that if other people have issues that are not, who are not African, have issues, we do not respond to them. But we do respond to them. We do work with our sisters from other areas of the world. But the thing is, like you all will agree with me, I am sure, you need to have a sense of direction. You need to have a focus, and our focus is African women. But then it means we're not going to shut our eyes to people who need our support as well. So don't be pushed away by the fact that it says African women. Okay, but you must have a focus. This is where I want to go. But then things happen as you move along, and you need to take that on board as well. And as you said, FGM, female genital mutilation, we look at that. We look at also child marriage. All of these are intertwined. We look at domestic and sexual violence, and we tackled abuse and discrimination, enabling African women and girls to achieve the dignity and the equality they deserve. Because it's unfortunate when you leave your own community, I'm not pointing fingers, and come to another community, there's always the tendency to lose your identity to a certain, to a certain point. You need to find it. And while people are looking for that, we are there to help them and to support them. Now, female genital mutilation, a lot of people will tell you, why call it female genital mutilation? Others would have suggested other names, perhaps female circumcision, and so on and so forth. But we at Forward go by female genital mutilation. That is the name that WHO, World Health Organization, uses. And why a female genital mutilation, we stuck to that because we think using that name, it brings out the seriousness of the whole procedure. Because if you call it female circumcision, then there is also the tendency to equate it with male circumcision. Male circumcision has its own issues, but then the difficulties and the challenges are not the same, or the health issues are not the same. So then you tend to downplay what happens with women and girls. So we have tended to hold on to female genital mutilation, because when you talk about that, it really hammers it home, brings out all the issues related to this practice. Okay, so that's where we are, and we've been working along these lines for the other day we celebrated 40 years of existence Forward, long before I got here, but then we have to keep going and respond to what is happening in the community, as I said earlier on. So how does WHO define, in a nutshell, FGM? It says, excuse me, the term female genital mutilation refers to all procedures involving partial or total removal of the external female genitalia or other injuries to the female genital organs for non-medical reasons. I think we need to hammer that home. Non-medical reasons. Things may happen where there's a medical need and you need to do stuff there. But for non-medical reasons, it is not acceptable. That is World Health Organization 2008. So that is where that has been our focus and Forward, and that's where what we use and we work on. And so what's happening there? We have used that to look at FGM, and we have classified it. The odd thing about FGM, it's not a matter of one size fits all, in the sense that I'm not saying that if you go to Sierra Leone, this is FGM. If you go to Gambia, this is FGM. It's the same thing. Or if you go to Ghana, or if you go to, let's say, Sudan, this is it. But even in the same country, you can have different types of the same practice. It depends on the ethnicity. It depends on the cultural nuances of that group of people. So it's really technical and deserves our full attention and study. For example, I think WHO, they've done a whole lot of work on it, and they've classified FGM, because that means doing a whole lot of research. And with they have what we call type 1, which is referred to as WHO type 1, and which UNICEF, coming into the game, also refers to as flesh removed. If you look at the picture of the female genitalia, if I was doing a training, I would have put a picture of the complete female genitalia, and we talk through that, because sometimes I say to people, it's strange, I'm talking to women and men and going through the parts of the genitalia, because a lot of times, even us women, we don't understand what we have on our bodies, or we don't know the importance of these parts. So for example, type 1 focuses on the clitoris, which UNICEF refers to as flesh removed. So you will find the cut off the clitoris, okay? And WHO will refer to it as type 1. Why cut off the clitoris? If we recall, the clitoris is about the most sensitive part in the woman's body. So when you remove the clitoris in the woman from the woman's body, you know you're depriving her of a lot of feeling and sexual enjoyment, if I can put it that way. We need to be honest and straightforward. So this is what is happening. So we do that when that is removed. In some communities, that is what is done. They would have reasons. We'll talk about the reasons. Let me just run through the types. And then we have type 2, which UNICEF refers to as flesh removed. If you throw your mind back, what happens with the type 2 is the labias. You know, if you look at the genitalia, you have the inner labia and the outer one. So, in some practices, they would cut off the labias, but they won't touch the clitoris. It depends. In other practices, they would cut off the clitoris, the inner labia, and the outer labia. So you are left open. We don't need rocket science to explain the problems you'll have if all of that is removed and you are left open. The infection, the problem, the difficulties, and so on and so forth. And then we move on to type 3. That is according to WHO. Then what happens with the type 3? Again, it depends on the community and the ethnicity. You would find they would cut off the inner labia, cut off the outer labia, remove the clitoris, and then bring the labias together and sew them all up. So that, I don't know if you would be able to see this. What you have there is something like what I have here. I don't know if you can see this. You know, you can see it's all like sewn up, you know. And so what happens for when you, if you have that kind, it's a lot of inconvenience for the woman who has that type, because what happened, your urethra is covered up, your clitoris has been removed if it's practiced. How do you pee? It means that the urine has to drip, drip down, you know, right down to the vagina, which is a little opening that they leave for menstruation. And also that through that bit of passage that the urine comes out. And you find out that if you're a teacher, sometimes girls in school, younger girls, they go to the loo, few minutes they come back. But if they've gone through this procedure, then they spend a longer time in the loo, you know, because the urine is now dripping. And so that is a problem, you know. So that is type 3, which is the most severe. And of course, it affects you when it comes to sexual relationship. What happens when you want to get married? How does your husband penetrate? It's a problem. It's very painful. And that is supposed to be part of the whole process. I don't understand it. I don't get it. You know, so in the community, some communities, they will take you to the clinic to be opened up. But then in some communities, they maintain that it is your husband who should be man enough to open you up. So you can imagine, like one somebody who we were talking to, she said, my honeymoon is not an honeymoon, it's a pain moon. Can you get that? Can you just imagine? It's not an honeymoon, it's a pain moon, because this is something that the husband has to do. And other times in other communities, the women would go to the nursing sister and want to be opened up before the wedding night, and the husband would not agree. Because if they get to learn that he did not open his wife up himself, it was done in the hospital, then it's an embarrassment for him. Like, you are not man enough to open your own wife. So you see all of these nuances there. Excuse me. In this situation, which we can talk about very briefly. It's a conversation we can continue with. And then that's type 3. But then you need to move on to the last one, which is type 4. Type 4 refers to any other thing that we do to the female genitalia for non-medical reason, like the pricking, the piercing, the incision. And in fact, nowadays people would go to Harley Street and do all sorts of things, which actually should come under this kind of practice, should not be allowed. Okay, so this is roughly the classification of FGM. So I hope we can begin to now realize the kind of problems, the kind of pain and the suffering that women who go through this practice have to put up with or go through. And the thing is, when they go through this practice, it's not that the children ask for it. As I said, it's a cultural practice. You would be asking yourself, why do they have to do it? Well, in the community, they would say girls are supposed to be married off as virgins. You marry as a virgin, you bring in, where they have bride price, a better bride price for your family. So there's this economic nuance as well. Okay? So when they sew you up like that, as you begin to get to the age of puberty, you're sewed up and made sure if your clitoris is removed, then all the funny dreams we get, we don't get them anymore. I don't know. Anyway, so that's what the thing is. So if you're married off as a virgin, then you bring a greater bride price for your family. And the thing is, if your clitoris is removed, then it's unlikely that you would get these funny dreams and get into trouble. So you see all of these difficulties and challenges. And again, what I would want to say is that what happens is that there's not one, even in the same country, depending on the tribe, depending on the area in which people live, there will be different FGM done to them. Some may go through type 1, some may go through only type 2, others type 3. In some countries, I don't want to name countries, I don't want it to seem as if I'm pointing fingers, but if you go like the East African countries, places like Sudan and so on and so forth, they tend to do more like type 3. Okay, where it's all sewed in. So it's different. And even with that, again, it depends on the tribe, it depends on the cultural background, the belief of those people. Right? So, can I continue? Yeah. So what we're talking about here is that this is a cultural practice. Where does I'll leave it at that, and we can talk more when we ask questions. But the problem is, why is this happening? This is a cultural thing. It has nothing to do with religion. Like I said earlier on, as far as we know, as far as we've researched, and those who've done research, even with our Muslim brothers and sisters, some will tell you, oh, it's Islamic. No, it's not required. In fact, there are stories that are going around that say that even Muhammad did not require this to be done on his wives. And of course, I know for sure that it is not a Christian practice, but it's all cultural. And the big question for me as I walk in this area, and I keep thinking, well, how did this start? How did it all start? And there are all kinds of myths. And one thing was like, oh, it started with the pharaohs. You know, in those days they went to war. And so when they went to war for a prolonged time, they wanted to make sure their wives were safe and chaste. And so they had them sewed up and that sort of thing. And then it became a practice. You know how things just pick up and move on and so on and so forth. So that is one thing I have come across. But how true that is, how factual that is, we are still trying to find out. It's a problem. And so other cultures do it. Where I grew up in Sierra Leone, for example, among the Creoles, it is not really practiced. But I'm sure there are people there who practice in that group because there is a lot of intermarriage, mixtures, and so on and so forth, and so things happen. But it tended to be done among the people coming from the provinces. So there is always this imbalance and not knowing who is doing it and who is not doing it. So you cannot point a finger and say, definitely it is this group of people or it is that group of people. It's quite a mixed bag. And for various reasons, which are mainly cultural. And parents would say, okay, when the child begins to get to the age of puberty, if I do this practice, then it prevents them from getting sexually involved. It protects them from becoming pregnant. And they can finish school and they can do stuff and they can marry as a virgin and so on and so forth. So it's a kind of false protection that would, in a way, cause you problem for the rest of your life. Okay. Now let me just quickly, I know you would want to ask questions, move on to talk about how it affects your health. There's a lot of health problems here. It affects the health of the girl child. It is not a simple thing because once you have removed the clitoris, that is the seat of pleasure. You can imagine what happens to that girl or to that woman. Growing up, we've had discussions with people who are locally, people we've been working with. They don't enjoy sex. For them, sex has become like a nightmare. They would rather not have it because you can imagine the pain it would cause if you had like type 3 and so on and so forth. So there are lots of problems involved in it. And besides that, there are also health issues. It affects your health. Sometimes these people who do the cutting in the communities are not medical personnel. They are not trained nurses and so on. And so they just use blades in those days, use knives or whatever, which is shared among the same group of girls. And so you can imagine the infection, the bleeding. People have bled to death. So, and what do they do about it? Once you go there and this happens, you bleed and die, they say it's your family that is evil. That is why this has happened to you. And so nothing happens. But now, with the kind of, in those days it was a taboo subject, but with the fact that people are now beginning to talk about it, you have organizations like Forward and other organizations talking about it. People are now beginning to talk about it, and governments are being involved, and there are laws, that are protecting, they're out there trying to protect women and girls. And so there is a change in attitude. But this is it by and large. Women suffer, girls die, for the rest of their lives, the infection, the health problems, the mental suffering. So it's not just physical, it is also mental. People lose their dignity. And girls would say, I did not ask for this to be done to me. It was done to me, but I did not ask for it. Why? 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 And for the parents in those days, it would be a big occasion. They would have, like when I went to school, they would have a big party. In Thailand, they called it Bondo, not FGM. They would have a big party and, presents, will be giving presents, will be giving stuff. But we did not know, because my ethnicity, we don't do that. We would admire them. Can you imagine a young girl, Yvette, looking at some of these with all the gifts and things and say, oh, I don't get to get that. My parents don't do that for me. Because for them, it's like when you have your 24th birthday party. I would get a 21st birthday party, but I wouldn't get that. So you can imagine the difference. But things are changing now. People are becoming more aware, and there's a lot of talk about these issues. Even though it was a taboo topic, it's now being talked about, and it's making a difference. So it does affect women, it does affect the community, and it does affect men too, because we engage with men as well, because they too come into the equation. Because if you marry a wife who's had a type 3, then you suffer. But in those days, they would tell the men, this is not your affair. It's a woman's affair. So they did not take an interest. But now with us talking about it, people like Forward, organizations like Forward, the men are beginning to understand. And we are saying to the men, it's a man's world, say what you will. Still, if you men come out and say, no, this must stop, then there would be quite a huge impact. But if you just let it pass and don't show an interest, things will continue in spite of what is happening. For in the UK, for example, there's a law. Apart from the international laws, there's the UK laws that protect people and girls who've gone through and support them. We have that. We don't have time for all of talking about all of that, but it's good to be aware that there is there. It's good to be aware of the health problems and so on and so forth. So I just want to quickly, before my time runs out, go to talking about the church. As I said earlier on when we had a brief conversation rather, it's like we've been to the mosque. We try to engage with all different people. We've been to the mosque and try to engage with faith leaders there. And some of them come out in the open and say, yeah, there's this excuse that it's sunnah. The sunnah is the one where the clitoris is just picked. It's Islamic. But it's not. It's not in the Islamic books. It's not in the Jewish books either. The Torah, I think it's called. And as far as I know, if I know my Bible to any extent, it's not in the Bible where women are required to do that. So why are we doing it? There are other underlying issues that we need to address and to get people to look at it differently. There are laws, but as I have seen with the little experience I've had, having laws does not always stop the problem. You need to go down and engage with people. And that is what Forward is all about, engaging with people. So, for example, this is a good thing that the church is now coming in and trying to do something. And I've got here FGM and the church. What is FGM? What is the church doing about FGM? We all know that it's not in the Bible. But it means that we should engage with the communities in our church more. We should look at the different people we have in our communities. Are they coming from practicing countries, practicing groups? Do they need help? Do they need support? Or they just come into church Sunday after Sunday? We sing, we pray, we preach, and so on. I think perhaps we need to make sure that our sermons, our interactions with people in the church are more practical. We interact with people more to see, or we look at people so that we can see that they have an issue. Okay? So there is some FGM in Christian communities, which are due to cultural religious blending. Because now there's so much intermarriage and so on and so forth. And I'll tell you this, believe it or leave it, there are white British women who've had FGM. There is so much intermarriage. People come in here, you marry a man who comes from the practicing community, you go back with him to Africa, and the family says, oh, for us, we believe in FGM. For you to be clean and whatever, you need to do FGM. Because if you've not done FGM, you are unclean, you smell, all of these funny things they tell you. And some women have gone through it. And so don't be surprised to find a white British woman who's had her bits removed, has had FGM, and then 2 years or 3 years after, the marriage breaks down and you have to come back. So there's all of that, those things that are happening. That's why we need to, as a church, try to interact with people in our churches. We should try as church leaders to have this authority of influencing some of these norms, these cultural norms. We have to look at the tradition, and we have to understand the ethnic identity of people in our communities. It's a small world now. We all mixed up. Nothing is cut and dried as far as I'm concerned, you know. So we need to interact more with the people, understand the people in the communities. And so that is so important. So we need to think about the culture of people, traditions carried out within Christian communities. What are the traditions that are carried out in our Christian communities? What is the role of the Christian leaders in shaping social norms? What are our roles? I'm not saying you should be a dictator and want to tell people what to do, but can we take a little bit more interest in the sheep we shepherd in our flock? It's not a matter of just coming to church on Sunday and praying and everybody going their way. End of story. Maybe there would be a woman there who would have gone through FGM and is suffering, is in pain, cannot pass urine properly. There are problems there. Do we have any mechanism in our churches to look at people and identify if you have these kinds of problems? Anybody who can help or signpost them or refer them? What are our gender norms in our society? So these are things that I think that the church should begin to look at. Because FGM is not in any religious book, as I said earlier on, but we need to work together with the communities in our churches and try to see how we can address some of these problems. Because if we don't have that cultural competence, then there are problems in the communities, in the church communities, because then we will not be able to communicate effectively with the people. It will prevent people become more and more traumatized, even if they go to church. They bring the trauma, because you can imagine if somebody puts you down and cuts you a little bit with a blade or a knife, the trauma, and you don't have any proper treatment to give you the healing. So they come to church with that trauma, but nobody is there to help them to get over there to address that. Okay? Can we look at interventions? Can we have partnerships with groups? Because I remember some of my colleagues going to one church and talking about, some of these issues like you are doing now, Methodist women. So maybe we should begin to think about how we can do a lot more of these things. Yeah, but because we got to begin to think about our overlapping identities, our race, our class, our gender, immigration status. All of these are issues which are problems that women have to work on. Because if your immigration status is not up to date, then of course you will not go and report that I have this problem, because that is a way of selling yourself to the authorities, in quote. Okay, so we have these intersectional identities, these things that are part of our church community. We've got to think about the religion. We've got to think about disability. We've got to think about the trauma that people have to go through, who've been through things like gender, sexual identity. All of that is also part of it. So I put a lot in the church's hand. What are we doing as a church, or what can we do to help? We need communication. We need to be talking to people. We need to be having talks like this and talking about issues. And we need tailored interventions, and strengthen community championship like you are doing now with Forward. I think this is a great beginning so that we can continue and do some more work and work together and see how we can access people in that part of the community. It's not just looking at the Muslim brothers and sisters, but the Christians also, the people who go to church, the priests themselves. What are their views? What are they doing? Or what can they do? Okay, so I think really this is real food for thought. And we need to go back as a church and see what we can do to begin to address some of these problems. But in terms of women suffering because of this practice, there is a lot of suffering. There are lots of problems, that we need attention, that need support. And we cannot continue to act as if nothing is happening or it's not of importance anymore. So, Olive, I think I'll end here and we can have a quick discussion.
Thank you, Yvette. Thank you very much for that information. It's gripping, and what we think we know on FGM, I think if there are others that are like me, I think I've been educated. We always just assume FGM is one type, which is, it doesn't make it any better. But it presents the realities and the risks of what is involved behind it. And thank you for the support and the resources that you're putting behind fighting this. And I think the challenge that you've given us on what we are doing about it really helps us. I think at this point, they will open it up to everybody, anyone who would like to ask a question. To make it orderly, if you could either put up your physical hand or your electronic hand. If you're like me, you're probably going to use the physical hand because I take time to find my electronic hand. But please feel free to
If
put
you're
your
like
hand
me,
whichever
I'm more
way.
likely to see your
Yes.
physical hand.
To put the physical hand. Please, the floor is open if there's anybody who'd like to ask some questions.
You can add or ask a question or share an experience,
Yes,
Yes,
please go ahead. If you can identify yourself.
Yeah, I've done it. No, I just wanted to say thank you so much. I've also learned a lot myself, considering, my line of work. So I've learned a lot, and maybe I'll invite you as well to my work, if you don't mind. But what I wanted to say, I think in our communities, the problem is, when we do the baby showers, when we are gathering as women, I think most of the times what we are just talking about is how can we satisfy a man? That's where the problem starts, because it's about them all the times, and we forgot who we are. So we end up doing over and above to make sure that they are happy. And what about us? So I think when we meet as women, when we're doing the baby showers, when we're doing things that matters to us, we need to be talking about what matters to us as ladies, educating ourselves, being able to identify abuse, not just to say when you get married, you need to make sure that your husband is satisfied, because that's where abuse starts. You can be submissive, but people can interpret it the other way around. So I think once we start loving ourselves, educating ourselves in terms of what is abuse, and ourselves as ladies, how can we love ourselves and make sure that we don't end up doing things that will we have to suffer from it for the rest of our lives. Because for us to be able to be in that marriage, to secure that marriage, we have to make sure that our women are our men are satisfied, but it's about us as well. I think that's where education is lacking. That's my my thinking.
Yeah, yeah. I think you're quite right. It's like we talking about these issues, we train what we call community champions, women who we train on these issues, different issues. We teach them about the law, we teach them about FGM, and help them to develop their own um important, kind of, so and so on and so forth. And there was a video I showed them. Sometimes I have to search for this thing. You'll watch the video, it says everything better than you would say it. And this is a cup of tea. And the cup of tea, and what this video was trying to say, like you rightly said, lady, you must take the first cup of tea. Because if you don't have the first cup of tea and the energy that you need, then you will not be able to serve other people tea. You understand? Because you don't have the energy. So it's important. So we always, in most of our background, we think, oh, it's pleasing the man, living for the man, and so on and so forth. And you forget about yourself. No, we are important. I'm not saying you shouldn't. Please don't get me wrong. But we should also understand that we are important. And we need to be able to take care of ourselves, look at ourselves, and then we can support those people who rely on us. I think that's what you're saying, and I
Yeah.
totally agree with you there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in a society where we have been brought up and coming from, especially from an African culture, where you're
Yeah.
brought up and you are almost marked based on how you can serve others
Mm-hmm.
better than you can serve yourself. It
Yeah.
exposes us to a lot of abuse in that, and I hear
Mm-hmm.
what you're saying
Mm-hmm.
there. Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly, and we all come from Africa, and it's your husband, your husband. No, I'm not saying don't please your husband, don't do stuff, but then you need to be able to take care of yourself. Because if you don't have the energy, you don't have the know-how, then, you
that's
know,
right.
everybody will suffer, including you, the husband,
Yeah.
the children. Yeah. Thank you for that. Any other comments or questions or addition?
Menesia had a question. Please go ahead.
Um, yeah, so from my understanding, thank you so much for the information, quite in depth and very awakening. I I have come across the fact that most of the FGMs are actually performed on children, young girls, less than 15 years most of the time. And so this is the population that is most affected. And I understand we are considering that, these are things we should discuss in our adults, get togethers as female African women. And that's great because obviously we are going to come and identify or come across women who actually need psychological support because, as we have learned, these issues or procedures really create lifelong um, unresolvable issues and complications in terms of physical health and mental health. But in order to reduce FGM activities, both here and abroad, um, as your organization has been there for 40 years, what's been your experience in actually trying to reach out to the younger girls so that they are more aware, and when they suspect or know that something is going to happen, because some of them are not even aware until they get to a point whereby all of a sudden they've got all these cultural people around them ready to perform the procedure without even being told what it is. There's no explanation for some of them. If you watch some of the videos, they're quite traumatizing. But it's about really reaching out, it's say in schools, to educate the girls about the presence of HGMs and which communities are it's most common in, not to raise fear, but in a way, in a safe and creative space for discussion. And in the church, how can we create that environment where we can talk about this to our children from these backgrounds to be aware of it and, bring some kind of awareness and probably cut. Because from what I learned, some of the kids are just taken away on holiday. They say prize to prize mostly when they're on the holiday. This is when that, these things happen.
Yeah, that's a good question. What I would say, how I would respond to that, Forward has a schools and youth program. So we are looking at different levels, youth and schools program. They work in schools, and the training they offer is for different levels. The lower levels, I don't have it on the top of my head, the lower levels, the middle, and so on and so forth. And then you have the young people, which they call Tuizasia. We also work in selected countries in Africa. But then I know that the Africa program has been suffering. Funding is a big issue these days. Tanzania, we used to have a big program in Tanzania. I myself have been to Zimbabwe to present a program, to take part in the program. It was UNICEF who organized it, but I was invited to go give a talk in the program. So we are working in Africa. I've also been to the Gambia. We also have a program in Sierra Leone. But then, as I said, one of the things now is finding the funding. We're also working in Ghana, to continue doing all of these things. But locally, we work with young people, we work with schools program, and I work mainly with professionals and community champions, community women. But then I don't work in the field. That's not my expertise. I train them, but I have my other colleague who is in charge of getting them to go into the field, to the communities, and meet the women. We call them, excuse me, community champions, so that they come from different ethnic backgrounds. They go to their communities and they meet these women there, talk to them, ask them what problems they have, support them. Because if you recall, the UK has been very good. A few years ago, when I don't know, money was a little bit not so tight, they had different FGM clinics in different areas of the country, in different boroughs, and so on and so forth. And so these women worked in these areas, and they would send women who've had FGM to go to these clinics to get support. Sometimes they are given advice, they're given medical support. Sometimes they have to be opened up, because I have also had community champions trained, where in the training I have said to them, okay, we've done some training, now what you would do, you would go and work from home and so on. And then one of these champions met somebody who had just been married and brought over to the UK. But they'd been together, she and her husband, they'd never had any relationship. Why? Because she'd had type 3. And of course, of the pain. And for the man too, it was painful. And at the end of the day, meeting this community champion, she was able to tell her, you can do A, B, C, D to be able to really get a relationship. So you see, we need to actually be more practical, more proactive in the way we go about it. So you have that, we are doing that. I train them, as I said, I was hoping. But the problem, we have this 16 days of activity. So there is so much going on at this time. So that's why I don't have more of my colleagues to be here. Because I would have been in another event and so on and so forth, or they would have been here and giving you more details on how. But what I do, I would train them, because for the last 3 weeks, we were working in Bristol, working with community champions. We were doing what we call a step-up training. So now they are not just outreach workers, they are becoming befrienders. So you can go to somebody and be a friend, give them more detailed support. You understand? So we are looking at it from different perspectives. So again, you're quite right. But then sometimes one does not have all the funding. Because if you don't have the funding, then you can't hire the people and you can't do the activities.
That's true.
But definitely we understand what you're saying. We see the need.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you, Yvette, for pointing that out. I think one of the things I was thinking of as you were speaking, I'll come back to you now, lady, is there has also been recently an influx of people from different cultures. Has that impacted the work that you do and sort of drained further the resources that you have with people coming in different cultures?
Well, I know that has been the case, but I cannot for sure say to you that because of the many migrants coming, this has drained the resources we have. I know that generally with the COVID, things went down. Because I remember in those days, we used to work 3, 4, 5 days in the office. We all went to the office. But with COVID, we had to downsize the office, and we all cannot work in the office on the same day because it's a much smaller space. We go on certain days and so on and meet and so on and so forth. So I know there would have been some effect, but we still continue and persist. That's why we have the community team. They are the biggest group because they go out to different boroughs. Like they would work in Wandsworth, they would work in Ealing and so on and so forth, Southwark, all of these places, Croydon and so on and so forth. In Croydon, for example, if they wanted training, they would ask me, I would go in and deliver the training, but then my colleagues, that's not my field, would go in and do the face-to-face, the outreach. Was Lady going to say something?
She was going to ask a question. Please go ahead, Trish.
Well, I think I just wanted to, to give you some information or just say something around if you know that there's any child or any teenagers they are being taken on holiday somewhere, and then end up in a situation. I think now adult social care, children's services now are aware of these things. So they will be able to phone and return back and make sure that they are safe. We actually supported someone last week, which is very usual where I live, and it was the first case I think for of this type, and we're starting to say, oh, we need to learn from this, we need to learn because it's quite unusual here down here. But we had one person who came from London and they managed to get rescue here. So I think once people know that there are some services out there, they can get support, because I think what people are afraid of doing is to go and report, and then they end up not having support, and then they end up being in that situation again where they are running away from. And that's what people don't like, because they are scared. What's the point of seeking for help and I'm ending up back to the perpetrator? So once, they come out and professionals now are equipped and they're having that understanding to support them. So you can give that information as well.
Yeah, we those who work in the field have a way of dealing, no, they have what an NRP, no recourse to public funding.
Yeah.
But I
No,
mean,
yeah.
my colleagues who work in that area, they know how, if you have a woman who has a problem, how you can support them and so on and so forth. So we have all of these areas. I don't have the information right at the top of my head, but then you have that where people can be given support, and sometimes if there's domestic abuse, you report also. Sometimes people with domestic abuse have been referred to forward. If we can handle it, my colleagues will handle it. If not, then they would refer you to another organization. So there is always referral, there is always signposting. So it's not that we want to capture everything. The focus is the best interest of the individual, and so we report to that send that person to where you can get the best support. I was just going to say, I don't know when we have to finish. I don't know if you can take a picture of this, or I can take a picture and send it, because you have all of these addresses at the back here, and the website. Can
I
you?
think if you say out the address, I could possibly put it in the chat for
Okay.
everybody to take that down.
Because what we have here, um, because we have the telephone number, you have the email, you have my email, the website. I'm not sure if you have that. That's www dot
www.forwarduk.
forwarduk.org.uk.
Okay, .org.
.uk.
Okay,
Yeah.
I've the website in the
Yeah,
yes.
or forward. So if you go to that website, you will get all the information, and
Yes.
more, that have been trying, and the individuals that you can actually contact to help
Mhm.
you, with working in the field, those of us who work in the field, and so on and
Mm.
so forth. But I mean, maybe if you are thinking of organizing a training, community champions training. I do community champions training, and you would have to talk to Nana, because some of these things I ask for a fee. We charge for a fee because
Mm.
we got to survive.
Yes,
So
that's
we ask for
there's
a fee. We train
that's right.
professionals as well. When I say professionals, yeah, I'm thinking of doctors, nurses, health workers, and so on and so forth. So they're aware, because as I was trying to say, cultural competence is important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you understand the culture, then you are able to deal with the matter in a better way. One thing I can just share with you, like Imperial College University, they have their trainee doctors, and they always send them to the new ones to forward for like 5, 6 weeks on attachment. They call it global health. So they understand things like forward. I work with them, I coordinate that. So they are exposed to that. Send them to the clinic. Like I said, I don't go out into the clinic, but I would link them up with my colleagues who work in the clinic. So they go and see. Because like I say to them, you may have a sick person who comes to see you as a doctor, and it's not always, sometimes the issue, we come with a physical issue, but the issue might not be physical. It might be more like, you know, mental, or a trauma that you're trying to deal with. But if you
Yes.
know
Right.
about these things, then it will help you to give that individual a more relevant treatment.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So they come
Yeah.
in. I do have them now with me, and maybe I could have asked them to come into this
Yeah.
session. I forgot. They have another one on Friday. And
Yes.
you know, so
No.
this is it. It's just reaching out and being relentless in talking
Mm.
to people, and don't leaving any stones unturned, more or less. And the
No.
church trying to focus, because we have different people in church, you know. Yes, Helen.
Yes. We'll take one last question from Helen before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Please go,
Okay,
Helen.
thank you. Thank you very much for your presentation. I think you're right that there are things that we can do for as the church, and I think one of those is definitely that we have to talk more about issues like this, many women's issues, many issues that otherwise we don't talk about. But from a purely practical point of view, do you have something like posters or stickers or something that we can order maybe to stick on the back of our toilet doors? Something like that, where women are going to see them, even where we can put it for men and women to see that if they know somebody with a problem, if they are the one with a
Okay.
problem, they can contact
Yeah. We
whoever is
have
relevant.
posters. Definitely, I will talk to the manager for the community program. And what I was showing you here is, in fact, our annual report for 2023-2024. Maybe there would be a copy also in the website. But I will talk to the manager in charge of UK program, and ask what she has and how she can get, copies of those flyers to you.
Okay,
Thank
Maybe
you.
it
thank
can
you.
be posted or whatever.
I think
Thank
it's important because in the many churches, especially like my own, we have different church congregations, 3 on a Sunday, 3 different churches. We also have groups who use it during the week. So it could reach out to many people who may need that support, and also just to raise awareness for anybody who is not so aware. I think it could be really
Okay.
important.
Yeah. So that's something for me to take home and link up with Olive to see how we can get some of these, or Leonora, how we can get some of these to you. But like I say, I would have to contact, it would take about a week because I need to go to the office, talk to my colleague and see what she has, and then get the admin people to post it out. You have all of these layers to go through.
That's absolutely fine. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so very much. I think one more question from Leonora.
Well, it's not a question, it's a thank you.
Really?
To Yvette, this is just, in a sense, a taster to make us aware, but see how we can develop working together so that churches, to find out how we can actually recognise the signs of if there's that sort of abuse. So we look forward, I do, to working more closely with you so we can get that information out. And maybe you can tell us how Methodist Women in Britain can help you in spreading the word. So I kept freezing. We kept freezing out. So which is why I gone. So I will shut up now just in case we freeze again. But I'd like to say thank you so much.
Freeze again.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And
thank you so much. Thank you everyone who's joined today and people who've managed to, and obviously we'll have more takers. This will be uploaded on our website as Methodist Women in Britain. But you can go onto our website or onto the Forward UK website to get more information. I think we will be engaging with Forward in UK more because I think it is necessary for us to be trained. To be trained and to get information and to get the publicity information that we need to post. And like you rightfully say, as we are going through the 16 days of activism, you saw Leonora was wearing orange. The day before yesterday, we were in London. We were oranging the world, speaking up against violence against women and girls. I am wearing my T-shirt, and I think Leonora is wearing it as well. Where we wear Thursday in black. Also speaking out is a campaign against violence against women and girls. So there are a lot of these campaigns that come in, which are general, but we don't want to end on just talking about it. We want to be.
No. I think we should go out here.
Yeah, we want to talk about it. So we're happy to, anybody who would like to go and be a champion, a community champion, a church champion.
Well, we'll let you know when we're doing the next training. If there's anybody who wants to come in and be a part of it, then he can be a champion in the church community and address issues that women have, look out for women who have special issues. But before you go, let me just, how many people did we have all together? I need to put it in my statistics.
9.
Yes, we had 9. I think there was somebody else, they must have fallen as well. And this is just on the live, but we would have more takers when we load it on the website. So it's
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvette. Thank you, everybody, for coming and joining us through. We will see you again in January when we talk about mental health. So please look at our website. And I know all of the topics that we're talking about are very interlinked. Because like Yvette was saying, there are things that may cause destabilization of your mental health, which are physical. So please join us again in January. The dates are all on the website. If you want to join so that you can get information, that link is on our website as well. But please go to Forward UK if you know of anybody or if you want more information. Thank you very much and have a good night.